and welcome to the latest episode of History You Didn't Know But Should. I'm Ray.
And I'm Chris.
And today we're going to be talking about an issue that's historical, but also very much present, and that is the issue of classified documents. And Chris, when I think about important documents that government officials in our nation have responsibility for, classified documents has got to be right up there at the top of the list. Yet, as we record this episode, multiple the sitting president, former president, and now the former vice president of the United States have all been found to have classified documents in their home or in their private office somewhere. And it's just an interesting thought that you have these people in these high positions of power that, whether on accident or on purpose or whatever the case may be, they seem to be treating, in my opinion, classified documents far too lightly.
Yeah, I think this is an interesting topic. We always try to be keen on what's going on in the world around us. And sometimes we'll tie our podcast topic into things that, we think are relevant, but also does kind of fit into the category of history you didn't know but should. And I think that this is one of them. There's a lot of people in America who think that they should know everything that's going on in government, that, as an average citizen, you have the right to know every detail at the given time, that makes you an informed citizen. And yes, there are certain things that we need to be aware of, but Ray, there are certain things that we as Americans don't need to know because, frankly, we just can't keep our mouths shut. We're a gossip-loving society, and we get a little piece of tidbit information and we want to share it to our grandma, but then grandma's going to share it to her friend, and it moves on. And, even in the highest areas of government, there are things that the president of the United States should be the only person that knows. It should be that person, not even the vice president, not even members of Congress. And, as we heard, back last year with former President Trump, they found all of these classified materials. And we thought, oh my gosh, how sinister that was of that particular individual, storing all of these records off campus or in his own personal collection. What we have now come to find out is that this might not be just a one-off, that this seems to be a very serious issue that needs to be addressed. And I think it's fascinating the lack of, security at the White House level as compared to the level of this as we might find when we look at Congress and Congress's regulations and rules as it comes to handling classified information. But Ray, maybe the first thing we need to talk about is, what is classified information? What is it? Growing up, we would always have top secret. This is for your eyes only, or things like that. But really, classified information isn't as easy to define as we might think that it is.
Sorry, yeah, what is classified and what is not? Of course, there's a government procedure that has to be followed to determine what documents are classified, what documents are not classified. When you mentioned top secret, I still remember as a kid, we would form clubs, and you would have to know the top secret password or whatever to be a member of the club. But top secret or national or classified documents, of course, are documents that it contain information that I guess we could say, if that information were compromised in any way, it would compromise some operation of the federal government. I think probably one of the best examples of how this might work is a document pertaining, let's say, to something going on in North Korea. Okay, that document may have names of informants, people who are North Koreans who are working with the United States government. It may have the names of spies that the United States has placed in North Korea. I'm not saying we do, I'm just using this as an example. It may have informational methodologies that the United States uses to learn about what's going on in North Korea. If that information were to get out to the general public, especially to the media, the damage that information could do, not just simply to the individuals involved who would probably be killed or jailed, but also to the United States' ability to learn what's going on in North Korea or anywhere else. Like I said, I'm using North Korea as an example. So I think sometimes when we think about classified documents, we're thinking about documents that contain information that need to be secret for national security purposes and for the purposes of protecting individuals. And you mentioned something that really caught my attention in your opening there, when you talked about the fact we have a lot of people in the country, and I think certain media outlets are like this. They think they have the right to know everything. We just got to know everything, and whatever we know, we've got to tell. And I understand that. I mean, we are a democracy, the United States is, and we're a free country, and freedom of press and freedom of speech. And of course, you want people to know, to be educated. You want people to know what's going on. I cringe every time I see one of these videos online where they ask, people on the street, who's the president, who's the vice president, who won the American Revolution, all that, and people who are adults cannot answer these questions. I cringe every time I see those videos. So, I'm certainly on board with the idea that people need to be educated, people need to be informed about their government, past and present. But at the same time, I agree with you, Chris. There are times when, there's things that the average person doesn't need to know. And I remember watching an interview, Jimmy Kimmel. He had an interview with George W. Bush. He had an interview with Barack Obama, and I think with Bill Clinton. And in each one of these videos, he asked them about Area 51 and aliens and all of that kind of stuff. And he said, if I was ever elected president, as soon as I was inaugurated, the first thing I'd do would be go find these documents. I would want to know what's in there. And I think it was George W. Bush made clear, I will never tell. Whatever's in those documents, I'm not going to tell. And he asked him, are there things that that you can't tell? And he said, yes, there are. Not necessarily about the aliens in Area 51. So I think, yes, we do want people to be informed, but at the same time, we all have to understand that there are things that can't just simply be put on Twitter or on CNN.com.
So I hope I get the idiom right, that what you don't know can't hurt you, or something like that. Like if I don't know it, it can't affect me. And, in government, there are different levels of what we could consider classified information. Not everything is necessarily top secret. And the word that you used earlier, I think, does kind of help distinguish, what's what. I mean, there are some things when an individual gets a document that is considered to be confidential, and confidential is the lowest classification. I mean, yes, it is important. Basically, confidential information is, we have information that if it was publicly disclosed could cause damage, could cause some damage. And so that needs to be confidential. Now, that's the lowest level of classified information. And then you move up to what's known as secret information. So we've gone from confidential to secret. And this information, if it was to be disclosed publicly, would cause serious damage. So we've gone up a level. So, less people will be involved in the secret classified information. But then the highest security classification, known as, basically, this is top secret. And this is information that, if it was to be received by the public, could cause exceptionally grave damage. This is stuff that is top of the line, that, it could destroy. You mentioned North Korea, but maybe it's the names of our agents who are serving overseas, or it's the specific locations of military things. There's just so much there that only a certain number of people need to have, but it's top secret top secret classification. Now, what happens with that is the president, as you mentioned, that with that Jimmy Kimmel thing, when they take the presidential oath, one of the things that they swear to do is to uphold, not just the Constitution of the United States, but the security of the United States, which means that long after they're president, that there are certain things that they just can't talk about. And I remember President Trump, you go back to UFOs and aliens, and I remember him saying, and maybe it was political speech, campaign speech running, I'm going to let y'all all know about Area 51. I'm going to release all that information so everybody will be able to know once and for all about aliens. But when he got into the office and when he started recognizing what he could say and what he couldn't say, he understood that if he was to give out specific information, that it could jeopardize the nation. It could jeopardize national security. And from what we had gathered, Area 51, since we were kind of talking a little bit about that, people might say, well, how could it cause exceptionally grave damage? Well, Ray, there's so much there about aliens and about spaceships and all that. If that information was to get out, it could cause vulnerabilities with national security and things of that nature. So we have to be very careful in understanding the importance of that material.
Yeah, and you think about Area 51, what information does the government have, whether it's talking about aliens or experimental aircraft or other things that may or may not be going on there? What information does the government have there that if it were to be put in the hands of, Johnny come lately, it could cause the United States national security issues? One of the things you talk about, the oath of the office of the presidency. One of the things that the president, when they're in office, gets is something called a PDB, or Presidential Daily Briefing. And these can be very long, they can be very brief, but basically it's dealing with things that are going on in the world that concern the president of the United States. And a lot of time these briefings come from the CIA, they may come from the FBI, the Department of National Security, whoever it may be coming from. But one thing that's very interesting is this information also goes to a select number of individuals. The president of the United States is one, former presidents are another. Now, how much of the information that the actual sitting president gets, that the former president gets, is to some degree up to the current president. But if you think about right now, you have President Biden in office, he's getting these PDBs. So is former President George W. Bush. So is former President Bill Clinton. So is former President Barack Obama and Jimmy Carter. Now, how much they get depends on President Biden, or whoever the president may be, depends on what he grants them. But they're getting this information. And what is interesting is that Biden took action last year that prevented former President Trump from getting this information, or a lot of this information, because he believed that Trump was not a confidential source. Now, whether one agrees with that or not, that's a totally different issue. But it shows how serious the issue of confidentiality and who's getting this information is. And of course, that spills back over on, it is very important. So why are we finding documents containing this information under the beds of former presidents and vice presidents?
Yeah, and in the garage, and in wardrobe places, and all kinds of different areas. And on this podcast, I think we've said numerous times that Congress doesn't get a lot right. But one of the things that Congress does get right is the way that they handle this information, because Congress has all of these different committees, and one of them is intelligence, another is military. I mean, there's all of these different committees that need to receive some of the same information that the president gets. And I do commend them for the strict nature of how members of Congress, not all members of Congress are allowed the information, but if you're serving on a committee and it is vital that you have some specific top secret classified information, there's a really unique process that they go through. And I think it's interesting because to read to read the documents or to be a part of the documents, they have to go into this room, and there's 3 of them on the Capitol. I think one on the House side, one on the Senate side, and then there's one in the office buildings, I think, but they're called SCIFs, SCIF, which are the sensitive compartmented information facilities. And what's really cool about these particular things is that you have to go into this room to receive the information. That's the only time you can handle the information or hear the information, is it's got to be in this particular room. And so when they go into that room, they pretty much have to strip down. I mean, they have just the clothes on their body. They don't have any electronic devices. They don't have any written material that they can take in. I mean, they basically go in barehanded, and they have to sign up. They have to lock up everything. And then when they're in there, they're given some paper and a pencil, if you want, and they can review the information. They can write down notes. They can do everything. But right after they've written down their notes, they have to lock those notes in that same SCIF. They can't take those notes out. So they go in and they read or hear whatever it is. But the rule is very, very clear. When you leave, you cannot take anything out. It's registered only in your eyes and in your mind what it is that you have received. And even if they can't make it to that SCIF, I found it interesting that if they need to take information maybe to your office, that Ray, there's a guy that comes with an attaché that is handcuffed to his wrist and actually sit down in the congressperson's office and will pull out 1 page at a time, allow them the opportunity to read it, and then they have to hand it back, puts it in, takes out another page. So Congress does have something right with this, because you would think there's no way to be able to get information out there. But in the executive branch, it doesn't seem to be working that way. And that does cause national security issues. No matter what party you're a fan of, this is a national security issue.
Yeah, because if the wrong person or persons were to get hold of that information, even if totally accidentally, the damage it could do to the United States government, and it could potentially be pretty big. I'm sitting here listening to you, and you're talking about the process that congressmen and women go through to read and access classified documents. I'm reminded of some things I've been following with New York's new Congressman George Santos, and there are Democrats who are trying to block his access to confidential documents and confidential information, because they say, look, this guy has lied about most of everything there is to lie about. And now he's in Congress. We don't know that we can trust him. And while he's maybe the latest example of this, it does show for the American people, I think, the seriousness of elections. When one goes to vote for a House member or a Senate member or the president, we've got to think more than about teams and tribalism and parties. We also have to think about, is this the type of person, whether, again, they're going to be a congressman, a senator, a president, whatever, is this the type of person we want handling the nation's most delicate information?
And I think you bring up, I don't want to go down a rabbit hole on that, but we just might, because you mentioned that particular individual. I don't know him. I don't know anything about him. He wasn't our district, our state, or anything like that. But here's the thing. There's a group of people that voted for him. He got into office. Whether I like it or I don't like it or whatever, the fact is that he is now a member of Congress. And by becoming a member of Congress, you are given the right to serve on committees, the right to do whatever. So, this moral thing that now comes, just because I don't like him or just because I don't want him, doesn't mean that he now, because he's a member of Congress, can't have access to those confidential records. If he's on that particular committee. So there is, I think, a greater role for us to have in electing individuals, that it can't be by party. It can't be because he's the son of a wealthy person or a powerful person, but we have to put people in there who are going to be moral and guided by truth and ultimately what's in the best interest of this nation. You know, you mentioned earlier that the thing about President Biden saying, well, I think that this president, the former president, is unfit to review classified information. Well, I mean, any president who comes into office could say that about the former president because they don't like them, they don't like their party or things like that. You know, maybe Bill Clinton didn't do things all that was right, or maybe George Bush didn't do things that were all right, or, you know, but then what happens to Jimmy Carter, who, bless his heart, at 90 some years of age, who still has the right to receive that daily briefing? How are you going to tell somebody like President Carter, sorry, sir, but you've gotten to an age where you no longer can receive that information? Or how do I allow someone like him to receive the information, but I don't like the former president just because it was a bitter conflict or whatever? You see where we get into we're doing exactly what we shouldn't be doing when it comes to who gets classified information and who doesn't get classified information. The president of the United States is the supreme, you know, person. He is the symbol of democracy in America. And whether he's a former president or if he is the current president, there's issues. And you could go all the way back to Nixon and Ford and that whole thing, talking about classified documents as well. So there's this, I just think it's fascinating to talk about that. It's more about just leaving a presidential document in your garage.
Yeah. Yeah. The issue of tribalism, which I know we're going to talk about more next week when we talk about social media, the issue of tribalism and how the two political parties in our country, and I don't know that this is, in some ways this is recent, in some ways it's not. I mean, you know, one of the areas of history I spent a lot of time studying is the early republic. And, you know, while they didn't necessarily think of political parties the way we do, they certainly had their camps. You know, they certainly had their sides. I'm a Jeffersonian, or I'm a Hamiltonian, or whatever the case may be. They certainly had parties, even if it wasn't in the modern sense. So I'm not one of these people who looks at the past with rose-colored glasses, thinking, well, if we can only do it the way they did it. But I do think that we have, and this is part, Chris, spilling over into next week, maybe when we talk about social media and its impact on society. I do think the tribalism in our society, political tribalism here in particular, is being driven a lot by the fact that we have very different sources of information. You've got your Republican sources, you've got your Democrat sources. And so we tend to view our side as the good side and the other side as the bad side. And if that starts leaking into these most powerful offices, then sitting presidents can make decisions about, you know, we're talking about the PDBs and all of those kind of things. Sitting presidents can make decisions solely based on whether they agree with the person in the office or not. That's a long way. That's a very long way to say, a long road to say that, you know, it shouldn't be, but it very much is, and probably is going to become even more dependent on politics. This, you know, this handling of classified documents and who gets this shouldn't be based on politics. It should be, you know, politics stops at the ocean, but it doesn't. Not now, anyway.
Well, and you know, and most of this discussion is being focused on classified documents that are in paper form. But with the advancement of technology, another issue that we are going to have to deal with is confidential information that is shared through media. You know, you and I working for government systems, all of our emails basically say that anything that we transmit through an email is public property. It's fed, I mean, anybody can access that. Freedom of Information Act. If somebody wants to go and get all of our emails that have been sent through our employment agencies, they have that right. And so with technology coming about nowadays, this government is so huge. It's a bureaucracy. I mean, all these millions and millions of people that they don't just shuffle papers anymore. Now we're shuffling it through emails and through other means. And with all of these cyber hacks and cyber threats to security, I do think it's important that if anything good is going to come out of the classified document scandal, and by the way, this is not a Trump scandal anymore, and it's not even a Biden scandal anymore. It's a executive branch, because now we found that Vice President Pence found some information at his home that he self-discovered. So all of these things are now being addressed. And I think that as our leaders start looking, how are we going to transmit information in this digital age to prevent China, North Korea, Russia using cyber to be able to access certain pieces of information that are maybe not top secret, but still classified or confidential. And remember, confidential still brings about damage to national security. And a lot of the confidential does have the right to be transmitted electronically. It's your top secret that's mostly, through paper, but that still can present damage. And so I think it's sad, but it's good that we're now paying so much attention to this, because it will help us to be more of a closed group when it comes to sharing the information that is really for their eyes only. Because Ray, I don't want to know all of that stuff. And I don't even know if I want to know if there are spaceships and aliens. I'll just live in my own world and fantasy world about, all of that stuff. Because, Ray, the conspiracy theorists truly believe that there's documents out there about who killed Kennedy, and nobody's releasing that information. There's the information about, did we even land on the moon? There's the conspiracy theorists that top secret information. So, I mean, all of a sudden, Ray, what will we as historians talk about if all of this confidential top secret information got out? Wouldn't have anything to talk about.
You talk about JFK. I remember running into someone a few years ago at the college where I teach who was absolutely convinced that, there's a larger conspiracy around the assassination of JFK. And they cornered a colleague of mine, and then later on cornered me, talking about it. And of course, you're always in that situation, hesitant to sort of agree or disagree, or at least I am, because you don't, you haven't read what they've read or whatever. But yeah, sometimes there's a danger that the government having classified documents, though it needs to have them, creates conspiracy theories, creates oxygen in the room for conspiracy theories. You're talking about electronic communications and stuff like that. I don't know why I'm going back to these late night talk shows for reference here, but I remember Barack Obama, and I do not remember when it was during his term, but he went on one of these late night shows and he was talking about his cell phone. And said when he became president, he could have a BlackBerry. And, in 2009, when he became president, I guess that was high tech. But then pretty soon, he wanted a smartphone. So they bought him a smartphone eventually and said, here you go, Mr. President, here's a smartphone. But now here's a list of things this smartphone can't do. You can't take pictures. You can't text. You can't do this. You can't do that. You can't do the other with it. And it just shows, how careful you have to be, with the information that's out there, in cyberspace, and how easily it can be accessed by nefarious actors sometimes. It's a totally different world. You're not just worried, like you said, you don't just worry about paper documents, though that's a big worry, because that's what's being found here in Pence and Trump and Biden, but you worry about electronic documents. I think going back to the Hillary scandals about the emails she deleted, what was in those emails? Was that classified information? Was it not? Who got access to her email? All of those type of questions.
So it's a fascinating topic that shows us that we do need to pay attention to it. I think that, this whole thing will make us a more secure country, hopefully, where we recognize that, yeah, it's okay that I don't know that information. And I'm going to just get on and enjoy my day and just keep on moving. So I appreciate the topic, and I look forward to seeing how it plays out, maybe even into our next episode as we continue to look at the concept of, what social media is doing and how it's driving just us as individuals.
Yeah, and I think as we prepare to next week to look into the issue of social media, as I was thinking about that, I've been doing some reading on that already. Actually, I'm not oblivious to the fact that this podcast depends on social media. A podcast is a form of social media, and we're Facebook and Twitter and all these other forms of social media out there. So social media and this whole new digital world, it's got a lot of strong things about it, but there's also a lot of downsides, as we've seen today, and we'll talk again next week. So Chris, great topic. I enjoyed thinking about it in the days leading up to our discussion here. I hope our listeners have enjoyed this conversation. If you would like to hear more, you can always find us on Anchor FM. We're available on Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeart. We're available almost everywhere. Just look up History You Didn't Know But Should. Until next time, I'm Ray.
I'm Chris.
We'll talk to you later.